Hello and welcome to another video about me talking about the design of a game that I really like. Today I'm going to be talking about another small cute little game called Florence. Now this is a game that I really like because it has an amazing story and has an amazing way of telling the story without any words. The game is about a woman named Florence, and the player goes through her daily life as she finds love, loses love, and then becomes her own person as she shakes off the ideals that her mother had instilled in her as a child. There's a section of the game where Florence finds this box of memories from when she was a kid, and then the player goes into a flashback sequence where they go and make crafts as Florence as a kid, and we see Florence being happy. And then we see her mother be like, no, don't do that. Study. And then we see her going from happy to sad. And what I found interesting about this part was that this craft that the player makes shows up multiple times in the story and is kind of an influential thing for Florence as she looks at it and is like, hey, maybe I want to be an artist instead of whatever she was doing as an adult. So this game has a few mechanics that I find really interesting that, reflect what's going on in the story. The biggest one to me that stood out to me the most was when there's speech, the way they represent speech between the two characters. And it's a system where there's little puzzle pieces that the player has to put together inside of a speech bubble to build what Florence is saying. And when she first meets her love interest, Krish, or her boyfriend, Krish, it's a ton of pieces that the player has to put together. And over time, as this chapter goes on, the game is broken up into different chapters. And over time, as this chapter goes on, there's less and less and less pieces to this puzzle until it's one single piece that the player just has to drag into the speech bubble. And I think that's a really cool way of representing how speech got easier as she got more comfortable and more familiar with this person. There's another part of the game later on when they're together and they get into an argument. Or normally the pieces, they're jigsaw pieces, right? And the pieces, the little butts sticking out, that connect the pieces together, they're round and stuff. And as this argument progresses, they get more square. They turn into squares. And then at the end of the argument, they become pointy. They become points. And I think that's a really interesting way to show the tone of the speech by how sharp the pieces of the text bubbles are. And on Krish's side, we can see super snappy movement, choo, 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 for the pieces being put together for what he's saying. Because before it's normally it's smooth, and then now that they're arguing, it's all jagged and pew, pew, pew. And there's so much emotion in just those couple of things. And it's such a simple system, but they executed it so well. Another mechanic I found cool was one time Florence gets into a crash with her bike and she falls off of her bike, and the player has to adjust these dials because everything she's all dizzy and everything's moving around and spinning around, and she has to adjust these different dials that are radio dials to make things clear and adjust it so that it's not warped and wobbly anymore, which I found interesting as a way to kind of show her getting her focus back. It doesn't the dials don't make sense contextually that she's adjusting them, but it is an interesting way to add a gameplay to her getting back, getting her head back after hitting her head and falling down. There's another part of the game where Florence and her boyfriend Krish are going traveling, and the way the player sees their different stops on their trip is there's Polaroid photos that come up on the screen, and the player has to shake them around to develop them. Now this one and the one with the dials are cool. They're interesting ways to add gameplay to something that the player could just kind of watch happen, but they're just, again, ways of adding gameplay to these parts of the story because they're not really necessary, right? The pictures could have just come on the screen already and developed themselves, or the dizziness could have just dissipated on its own. Well, I guess also with the speech bubbles could have just gone up there on their own, but these are just ways to add simple gameplay to this story where it's not necessary, but to make it more interactive and engaging, they do this, and they figured out ways to actually, do it in a way that kind of makes sense. Not necessarily for the dials with the bike, but with the shaking the Polaroids or putting the speech together. They kind of make sense as ways to add gameplay to the story that the player can interact with, if that makes sense. I think the way they made these little mini games that the player has to do, or these little tasks, I think they're pretty well designed for the mobile platform. They take advantage of what you kind of usually use your phone for. It's a lot of tapping and swiping, and some parts of the story, the way you progress through them as you scroll through the story, you're scrolling through your social media feed. They also changed the orientation of the games. Sometimes you play it vertically, and then sometimes you have to rotate your phone into landscape mode, which is cool that it utilizes, the portability and the movability of the phone. Now, I think one place they could have done better was with the Polaroids that I brought up before, that instead of the player shaking it around with their finger on the screen, if they actually shook their phone and took advantage of the gyroscope in the phone to detect oh, the phone is shaking, let's, develop the photo. But other than that, I can't think of anything that was missed with this design. I haven't sat down and actually thought about hey, this is what could be improved and this is what couldn't, in terms of utilizing the handheldness of the phone. But overall, I think it is pretty well designed for a mobile experience. There is a PC version of the game. I haven't checked it out, and I have no idea what they would have done with some of the scenes. Probably you just use your mouse instead of your finger. But I feel some of these things would be more comfortable, or are more comfortable being done with your finger than a mouse. The game also has a really nice soundtrack that's all live recorded music. And I really like that it has live music. It sounds very nice. That's kind of all I have to say. I'm not much of a music person. I can't say much about music. But I like the live recorded music and how it sounds. And yeah, if you want to check out me playing this, I probably should have said this in the beginning. I am also going to be uploading a video of me having played this game, though it was a couple years ago. I'm going to be uploading a video of me playing this game at around the same time, maybe before I upload this one. So if you want to see that, I'll probably pop that on as an end card if I remember at the end of this video. But yeah, this is the second, episode. I don't want to call them episodes, but this is the second installment of me doing this. I'm enjoying this. I'm having fun with this. I think it's going well on my end. It's nice to just sit and talk about a game I enjoy. I have a lot of games I could do this for. So I'm probably going to keep doing it as long as I have time to do it. I'm probably going to keep doing it for a bit. See, if it'll help me with thinking about the design of games and looking at them from a design standpoint and understanding more about what makes good design or bad design. And maybe it'll help me when I'm designing my own games. We'll see. And maybe it'll help you looking at and thinking about the design of games. But yeah, that was it for this video, guys. If you watched to the end, thank you for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Bye.